I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and today I'm speaking with Joseph Mateo, the director of the short animated film Blush, which is currently streaming on Apple TV Plus as part of our Meet the Experts panels for film animation. The first question I wanted to ask Joe is, what is the story behind this, behind how this short film came to be?
Yeah, so it's based on a very personal story. I lost my wife from breast cancer like 4.5 years ago. And that same night, I had a trouble breathing. I didn't know what was happening to me. It was really scary. And it was panic attack. I had to call a doctor friend of mine to tell me that, Joe, you're having a panic attack. And fortunately for me, when it happened, my girls were, my two daughters, Joanne and Mina, were beside me. That kind of helped me go through it. And and after that, I struggled to go back to work for like a few months, and I keep looking back to that moment where I realized that Marianne was my heir, my wife, who I lost, and my kids saved me, and I was just inspired to share this message of one way to overcome a great loss is to surround yourself with people you love, and I was, it's and I then from then on I just started shaping the story in my head, and it kind of naturally helped me to thinking about story again. I'm a storyboard artist, and it just kind of helped me think about what I do again. It was actually very therapeutic.
So how did you come up with the design for the alien in the movie? Because I thought that was really innovative to make it look almost human. Where did the idea for that design come from?
Thinking back, it's really inspired by the pink ribbon. There's something dynamic about that, just a shape of that pink ribbon. And I always think about the alien with a floating hair, because of the shape of it. And it kind of originated from that. And originally it was the hair was kind of like an alien tentacle, but during when we started screening our story reel, I think it was John Lasseter who pointed out maybe we can design her hair more like a ribbon it's just more appealing, and to directly tie that character to its origin. So yeah, it's that's how it came out to be. And I remember him having a very specific texture, and really he sent me pictures of what he's imagining that pink ribbon could look like. So
how did you I think one of the things that really sticks out about what makes this short film work is the pacing of it. How did you land on the pacing for the film?
Yeah, just going back, I've been doing story, so the challenge, I kind of know the challenge of getting into shorts and the limited time that we have in doing a short format. But when we think about story, right, my experience is you try to find your personal connection to it, and how you relate to the characters, and I think it helps with the authenticity of what you're doing. But with this, I kind of just, it's very autobiographical, so I just found myself digging from my time and my experiences with Marianne, and thinking about the story again helped me kind of look back into those moments that I had with her, those um, before before she got diagnosed and stuff, which was very special.
Were you able to? So you are a Filipino American, and
Yes.
were you able to incorporate any aspects of your Filipino heritage into the short?
Yeah. The mango. Um, I grew up eating that. That's like our favorite fruit. I remember growing up in the Philippines, that's always like a part of almost every meal. Like that's your dessert, the mango at the end of every meal. And there's a specific way. I remember my grandma would like peel it right from the top, so that there's the bottom part we can hold it, so we don't have to get messy, eating the mango. We can hold the bottom part with the skin on, and I had to incorporate it on the short. And of course, the hedgehog, I guess you call it when you cut it crisscross, and yeah, just given this opportunity, I just want to, and how personal the story I'm telling, I just want to take advantage of like really infusing it with like things that I grew up with and a little bit of my culture, and then the astronaut's chest, I know it's very subtle, and um, I kind of have to point it out to some friends of mine, even that it represents like the Filipino flag. But yeah, so yeah, and of course the mango tree, and the design of the girls are based on my two daughters.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things I was curious about. Did you use your daughters as the basis for the design of the two daughters in the short?
Yeah, yep. The youngest character, right, is based on my daughter Mina, which and her hairstyle. I remember when I was designing her, I wanted to go back to that moment where I found her behind her sofa hiding from me because she got her bangs, right. And I remember designing it, and she was like, "Dad, do you really have to do that?" But it's so cute, it's so charming. I just want to preserve that moment, so, and then my for the older sister, um my my daughter has been wanting to color her hair pink, and I've been saying no. um and now I kind of don't have an excuse anymore, like she's planning to color her hair for like end of the year. So she's very excited about that. Yeah, so those two are based on them, and they're very much a part of the process of making the short, because we were stuck together in the house, and they would actually give me notes, but they were very helpful in like um, helping me with like tech support issues. They were my in-house tech support, I guess you can call it that.
And I'm sure doing an interview with someone like me just only reinforces, the whole hair coloring decision. Yeah. So
Yeah.
before you did this, in your years of working in animation, you actually won a juried Emmy award for the work you did on the show Prep and Landing. And I was just curious, what was that experience like of winning that Emmy, especially because that was one that was announced beforehand and not like one of the like categories with structured nominees. What was that experience like?
Yeah, it was just something so unexpected for me, because I didn't even know that they submitted, my director submitted my boards to the Emmy. And I just remember that moment, I think I was walking down the hallway, and then they told me that I won an Emmy. It's like, first of all, we don't make feature, I was at feature animation then. We don't make TV shows, and not realizing that, yeah, Prep and Landing is going to be a TV show. So yeah, it was like, what is this real, and then, yeah, it was just, I remember being blown away and not believing it for the longest time, you know. And I told Marianne, but it provided a really great moment when I shared that with Marianne, because she's super into that, going to the red carpet and stuff. And so it's great that I had that experience with her,
Well, Joseph, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to having you join our panel discussion in just a little bit.
Yeah. Thank you, Charlie.
I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and today I'm speaking with Tom McGrath, the director of The Boss Baby Family Business from DreamWorks Animation, as part of our Meet the Experts panel for film animation. First thing I wanted to ask was it always planned that there would be a sequel to what is now the first Boss Baby?
No, not entirely at all. I was really attracted to Marla Frazie's 10-page kind of book, and got together with my partner Michael McCullers, and really when we developed the story, it was kind of just the story of these two competitive brothers, which for me channeled. I have a brother that we're very close in age, and it was kind of a love letter to my brother, and just about our childhood. And at the end of the movie, we revealed that it was the main character, Tim, as an adult telling his daughter how he reconciled with his brother. And there was a little baby at the end of the movie, the first movie, that winks at the camera. And it wasn't to set up a sequel. It was actually just to tell kids that baby core is real, and it all wasn't just in the imagination of this kid. But I guess, the studio called and they said, hey, we'd like to do another one. And I was kind of, it was kind of one and done, and just started thinking about a story and thinking about my brother. And, family drama is a lifelong struggle. I don't know if you have a brother, Charlie, or a sister that are close in age, Just thought, well, it'd be great if we picked up the movie where it left off, and Tim and Boss Baby are adults and they grew up and grew apart, and Tim's a stay-at-home dad, and Boss Baby was hardwired for business and became a hedge fund man. I kind of went back and looked at my brother's story, and he had taught me to make Super 8 films. We made them as kids when we were really young, and we'd recruit the neighborhood kids and all that kind of thing. And not knowing you could ever make films for a living. Hollywood could have been another planet and that sort of thing. And but we had a lot of fun doing that in our early years. And then till I heard of Cal Arts, where you could learn animation and go to California. And so I kind of had borrowed a lot of money to go to Cal Arts, and that was kind of my ticket into animation. Meanwhile, my brother at a very young age had 2 boys, and he was focused on his family. And I was so focused on my career, we kind of lost touch through the later years. But I was always envious of him because he had 2 beautiful sons and a family, and I never had kids. And I was so focused on career, and I kept thinking, man, I missed out, What's the measure of success? My brother, having a family is really a true measure. And I think he was always kind of envious of me for having the chance to make movies and that sort of thing. So I kind of channeled that into it along with our writer, Michael McCullers, and we decided, let's do this in a fun way. Wouldn't it be great if these 2 adults had to relive their childhood, become better men, in the end, and that baby at the end of the first film, it's an opportunity for a strong female voice, Amy Sedaris, who was the kind of the catalyst to bring these 2 brothers back together. And then we added in the father-daughter story, and that's kind of how we kind of came to Hospital.
What was your brother's reaction when he saw this movie? Has he seen the movie?
He has. The first movie, I just wanted to make him cry, which worked. He cried, and then this one, it was I think the same reaction. I think every director will tell you, you have to find that personal angle to the story, and I think because it's family, it's somewhat ubiquitous. We've all had family. We've all had family experiences, and if we could have a message like, it's never too late to have a second chance with family, that would be a great thing to do. So I think when the first movie was based on the brother story, this one had more access points, with the father-daughter story or the grandparent story or the kid story and that sort of thing, and the brother story. And so we just wanted to have different points of view in this one. and hopefully resonate with a larger audience.
There are so many amazing sets in this movie, not just Baby Corps, but the Acorn Academy, I think it was, the Jeff Goldblum character runs. Which parts of the movie were the most challenging to design?
It all is. I think, as we got into the story and the concept of the story got bigger and bigger and bigger, introducing the school and that sort of thing. I think I'm so happy with Ramon Zibach, who was our production designer, who handled everything. We had to build an entire town. We had to, revamp all our characters for the animators to do more with. I think the challenge is always, you have so much story, you need to fit it into an hour and a half, and the lesson is keep your story simple so you don't lose the character moments, because we had such a rich cast and they were all adding these beautiful character moments. And so it was finding ways along the way, I think, to simplify the story in a way so we could let the characters. And that's always a challenge, I think, in any film, It was a great team, so we were able to build all the sets we needed, and the effects artists, did more on this film than I think even on a How to Train Your Dragon film, in a way. But at the end of the day, I think everyone was so invested because we made 75% of the film at home that it was really a labor of love, of people saying, we can do that at every turn. So we didn't have to compromise anything. So
you mentioned earlier that Amy Sedaris is the voice of Baby Tina, who is someone who I absolutely adore. I actually have a cat that I named after her character on BoJack Horseman. And
awesome.
I was curious, what about Amy Sedaris made you believe that she was the right person to voice Baby Tina?
I've always been a fan of Amy, since Strangers with Candy. And I just know her as a character creator, And then in her show At Home with Amy, she's always inventing characters. And so she was always in mind, and just like talk through her character with her and this new millennial, as opposed to Boss Baby's Mad Men era baby. What if we did this millennial person? And she had this voice that she uses on her nieces and nephews. And originally her character wasn't that big in the movie. She was kind of the messenger to tell them about this new mission. And as Amy got in there, we just realized that she was the kind of the hub of the entire story. She was the one that needed to get the brothers back together. So the story started to revolve around her character. And that's part of the discovery process, I think, when we make our movies. It's not like we shoot our scripts. We actually workshop a play, and for me, like, encouraging improvisation is really valuable, because that's how you let the actors give you the best performance. Although it's over a 2-3 year process where Amy will ad-lib a line, and then go to Alec or Jeff or James Marsden, and then they'd ad-lib another line. So over the course of these 2 years, we would make it feel like they're in the same room.
How that actually brings up an interesting thing. How difficult is it to compile that when you have people that are improvising on things, or riffing on things, and then having, especially if you have people all in different places and you're trying to put all of that together? How difficult is that process?
Well, as a director, you are the caretaker of the story. So the story really well. And there's, always different ways to get from A to B. And I think, the script was really solid, but really to be in the room with them and just encourage and be their scene partner and read with them and then go off book, it just opened up the world a little bit. And so we spend a lot of time in the recording booth just playing, and I think it's your job to kind of piece it all together, and then when I record another actor, you're representing the improv that was done before, sort of thing. It's kind of the magic trick of animation, is really feeling like all these characters are playing off each other.
So the first Boss Baby movie from a couple of years ago scored an Oscar nomination for Best Animated Feature, and I was curious as to whether that caught you off guard when it actually got that nomination.
I was surprised, because I never think I don't think of the awards as much as the reward of being a kid's first movie, or sitting in an audience and watching people watch your movie in a way. And I think, the reward for me is really like, sitting in a theater, especially when you do a movie with comedy, because comedy is very communal, and the theater experience is great for comedy. That's why it's particularly hard on this one, because theaters were only at certain capacities when the movie came out. We did streaming as well, so you don't get to get the reward of sitting in a packed house with that. So you just kind of hope it does well, in that regard. And I was honored to get that nomination, and I think it just represents all the work that everyone put into the movie. And I never think of it as a nomination for me, but just all the people that put love into every frame.
Well, Tom, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in our group chat in just a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. I'll see you in a bit.
I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and today I'm speaking with Kurt Albrecht, one of the producers of the Mitchells versus the Machines, which is currently streaming on Netflix as part of Gold Derby's Meet the Experts panels for film animation. First question I wanted to ask you was, how did Michael, the director of the movie, come to mix his love of cinema into a family tale about averting a global robotic takeover?
Well, one of the things that attracted me to the movie most was it was filmmaker driven, and Mike Rianda, he says he came to Sony to develop this movie and was working on it. He started in 2015, I think. So working on the script, coming up with ideas, and he was on a road trip and he came up with the idea, what are the things I love? And he's like, well, I love my crazy family and I love killer robots. So he literally just took those two things together, came up with a story, and that was his pitch way back, just to get the whole ball rolling. And then he worked with Jeff Rowe, his writer, his co-writer, and co-director, and they worked on the script and came up with there's been many versions of it, but what you saw, so it really was Mike just choosing things he loved and working with those.
I think the cast of the movie is really fantastic, including people like Abby Jacobson, Danny McBride, and Maya Rudolph, and Beck Bennett. But I really was taken by the choice of Olivia Colman voicing Pal, and I was curious as to what were you and Michael looking for in the voice for Pal that led you to casting Olivia Colman in that role?
How can you go wrong with Olivia Colman, right?
Besides the obvious.
No, you wanted someone in that role who could be, menacing, a baddie, but also have heartwarming moments, with her creator, and then when she's debating with Katie at the end, like the value of humanity, essentially, she is an amazing actress, and she even did. I have to say that we did get her, and it was a amazing. I think she had won the Academy Award right when she accepted the offer, so it was like that was an amazing thing. But then when we got into the records, her willingness to, have fun with the character and give us more than we ever expected is amazing. She really brought a lot to Pal. And the scene where she's flipping around and just screaming, I mean, come on, right?
It's one of those things where sometimes I wish that you had like cameras in the recording booth so you could see what it looks like while they're recording it.
Exactly. Yeah, we had a lot of our records, as Tom was saying, like doing these films during COVID was tricky, and we did a lot of records with people in their homes because they couldn't come into studios or come to Sony to do their records. So it was a lot of those were in her bedroom with her big puffy bed behind her. So it's kind of surreal. It's great though.
One of the other interesting casting choices is that Michael actually does voice the son in the movie Aaron, and he's really funny in that role. How did he end up coming to voice Aaron?
Well, when we were making the movie, you start before you hire any actors, you're using scratch performers or just people around the studio to build rough cuts of the film, early story days. And Mike is a really good actor, and he was most of the characters in the movie at one point when we were doing those early cuts. And we started casting, and we tried different people in the Aaron role, not cutting different options in, and it was. No one quite got the sweetness the way Mike did, and there was a lot of concern initially about that he sounds too much like a man, and it was we did work a lot to make him be young, and Mike worked on it a lot. His warm up was always hello. He would just get into his little Aaron voice, but it was something that we did debate. Is it the right thing to do to not have an actual child in there? But Mike gave the heart and gave the comedy equally important, to get that. And that was something that he was really concerned with. And that's why we ended up going with him. But it was, I think it all came out really well. They feel like a real family,
Oh yeah, no, that chemistry comes off very, very clearly. What was the process like of designing the robots for this movie? Because they have such a wonderful, distinctive look to them. And of course, you also throw in, people like Beck Bennett and Fred Armisen helping to voice them. And, that's like the cherry on top, But what was it like to design those characters?
It's funny you ask about the robots, like the helper bot, the main ones. We had initial designs that were in the story reels, so it was something that was done really quickly. And then we hadn't even had the full production design team on in the early days. And once those people came on and more artists came on, we started to iterate on the robot design. And we did stuff that was more kind of pushed, more designy, ones that were more mechanical, all these different things. And we ended up doing all of that work and came back around to what was very close to the initial design that you see in the film. So it was this long road of like pushing away from that, getting to something that was more mechanical, more slick, and then coming back around to what Mike had initially. He didn't draw it, but it was something that was done by one of the first artists that just came on and was like, this feels like a robot that a big corporation would design for consumer use, and it just it never varied very much to the very end.
And I'm also curious as to did the nailing the pug in it, nailing that design, was that something that like happened like in terms of like when you were looking at designs like right away, or did it take a couple of tries to get that look of absolute insanity right?
Well, that's Monchi is actually, there was a Monchi in Mike's family. I think it was his aunt's dog. And they've had pugs in his family for a long time. So he had a very specific idea in mind, the big eyes, the wall-eyedness. So I think we got very close very quickly. But then in building the CG version of Monchi, getting like the little, remember there was a lot of time spent on the little butt swirls, the little in the little hair, and how long the hair, how short the hair. So it was a lot of refining of the finer points, the teeth, the little chipped teeth in the front, they're not always there. They come and go. How big the tongue is. Like there was a lot of refinement of the small things, but like the main shapes were very quick to arrive to. And then giving him the animators the controls they needed so he could get all of the performance he wanted out of Monchi, because he's a pretty important character in the film. And before we were on lockdown, we actually had a couple test screenings with audiences, and he tested through the roof every time. Favorite character, Monchi. So that was a big studio note throughout the making of the film. More Monchi.
Well, speaking of Monchi and the Mitchells, do you think it's possible that we might see the Mitchell family return in another adventure at some point?
We're talking about it for sure, trying to get the right people on board. But yes, there's it's done well, for Netflix for sure. And there's certainly talk of it. Nothing's official yet, but we're working on it.
And just one other question I had about Michael is how close was his personal family experience to the family dynamic of the Mitchells? How close, do you know how close that was?
It's pretty close. His father, Brian, is not unlike Rick in many ways. And he is kind of the one of the designs, like the design of Rick's jacket, that yellow jacket that he wears. There's a photo of his dad, and we just use that as the reference for the design of the character. Also, like it's hard to talk about these things, hard to talk about emotion. That's definitely Mike's dad. He's not one to show emotion, and we did have a screening for Mike's family that I got to go to when the movie was done, and Mike stole some photo of his dad tearing up in the movie. So that was Mike's victory dance right there. So they're pretty close, and Maya's character is really based on Mike's aunt and his mom kind of combined, but this incredible high energy mom that he has it's pretty close, I would say. There's a lot of personal stories drawn from his life that are in the film, outside of the robot apocalypse, of course.
Give it time.
That's right.
Well, Kurt, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we look forward to seeing you on our panel in just a little bit.
All right, see you in a bit, Charlie.
I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and today I'm speaking with Garth Jennings, the director of Sing 2, which will be released by Universal in theaters on December 22nd as part of our Meet the Experts panels for film animation. First thing I wanted to ask you, Garth, is how did you come to voice Miss Crawley in this thing? Because that was she had some of my favorite parts of the movie.
Yeah, Miss Crawley was, and you've talked to some of the other guys on their project about the fact that so many of these films start with scratch, the scratch process with storyboards, and before you get the actors on, we just work using the voices of people in the studio. And I would do a lot of the voices of the characters because I was writing it as well, so it was easy to just do that. And one of those was Miss Crawley. So originally for Sing, it was only going to be the scratch voice, but I just loved being her, and it just stuck. It was one of those voices that just stuck. And yeah, you're right. Her part sort of expanded in the sequel. She's a very useful character. She can get a lot of things done in a sort of remarkably unique, lizardy way. So yeah, yeah. I've ended up being an elderly lizard. It's my calling in life, clearly.
I mean, I don't think you could ask for anything more. And there's like the scene where she takes over directing the whole thing is like, yeah, that is just like comedy gold.
Thank you. I'm very proud of that scene. I think she steps up pretty well. I also like the fact that at the beginning, to get her orders, Buster Moon says to her, listen, you cannot let production fall behind. Not one little bit. Is that clear? And I always feel like that's, real. That's like us. We just can't let this fail. Everyone has to keep going. Yes, no, she has such a good time. It's also nice to score it like a war movie, like the drums come in and she's gonna get it done. It's nice to see somebody completely inept step up. Yeah.
So one of the striking things about the look of this movie is getting to see Red Shore City. It's this, expansive and meticulously detailed setting. What was it like to design that and then to bring that to life in animation?
That was nuts. I'd never been to Vegas before. I'm from a little town in Essex in England. But I thought I knew it. You see it in films. You see it. It's like the Mona Lisa. You kind of feel like you know what it is. You don't need to see it for real. But Chris Meledandri was like, no, you have to go. It's extraordinary. And I'm really glad I did go for a couple of reasons. One, because the scale of the place sort of blew my mind. I remember I was going to go and see one of the Cirque du Soleil shows one night. I'd never seen one before. I went to meet my producer said, oh, let's meet at the lobby at 6:30 because it starts at 7. I was like, well, if it's in the same hotel, we don't need to meet at 6:30. It doesn't take half an hour to walk to see. She says, no, it does. That's how big this hotel is. like, it isn't. Sure enough, we meet and we're walking for 20 minutes. We're still inside the same hotel. And I was thinking, God, if you walk for that long in my town, you'd be in the next town. And it was just one hotel. It blew my mind. And then you go and see a show, like a Cirque du Soleil show, like Car. And it's just staggering every second, the scale and ambition and the ingenuity and the athleticism. So I was very inspired by that trip. Also about how much people love, how many families go and people have a totally different experience. And it's really beloved. So yeah, it was trying to capture how lovely that feels, how grand and enormous, and how lovely it would be for the cast of Sing to arrive somewhere like that. When in the first film, when they're in rubble or in their little apartments or in a garage, it's all very small in the first movie. So it's kind of deluxe for them. Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously with the title like Sing and the plot, you have a lot of wonderful uses of songs in there. But I'm curious, do you have a personal favorite artist that you would have liked to have incorporated one of their songs into the film, either the first one or the second one?
There's never been a song that we did. Everything's in there for a reason. The thing is, it's always informed by the story. Very often, the songs are being written as I'm writing the script. Or even if it's not the final thing that's in the movie, it's like okay, it needs this kind of a song. It's like a flag in the ground. Do you know what I mean? Like, it needs to feel like this and do this work because it has to serve the story. It's not, you can't just put anything in there. There are moments where it's just fun and that's okay. But most of the time, that music has to do a lot of work. So it's not been a case of feeling like there's nothing I've missed out on anything, because I feel like whatever's in there is in there because it's doing a very important job on a lot of levels. It's fun, it's doing the right emotional thing, and it's working for the character and the overall kind of musical palette of the film.
That actually makes me think, was it ever tough to find a corresponding song to go with a moment in the movie? Was that ever a difficult thing to find?
It's not so much difficult. It can be, but most of the time it's difficult you'll have two or three and you're like, I don't know, you'll try them out, and some will do one thing well, but not one other thing. They're hard to explain really, but because music's weird and everyone has a strange, their own unique perspective on it. There's a small team of us working on it, but we'll all have our own passionate view on it. But at the end of the day, it will always come down to, does that feel right in the moment? And sometimes I'll be writing it and be utterly convinced that the idea I've got on the page here is going to be perfect for that scene. And then you put it in that scene, you're like, oh, that didn't work at all. And then you sort of go back to the drawing board and we work with other people and come up with other ideas. And suddenly something will come along that really surprises you. And, like there's a bus journey scene and I knew it should be emotional and I had a track in mind that just didn't work. And then we found a song I've always loved by Mercury Rev called Holes, which is not a very well-known song, but it's sort of beautiful and has exactly the right tone. And it really surprised me how well it worked there. Some things will be conventional and some things will be something you really don't expect. It's there's no science to it. It's a lot of chatting and a lot of listening.
To look at your career as a whole, prior to
it makes no sense.
No, it makes sense. It makes sense. But I wanted to pull back and looking at your career as a whole. I didn't realize prior to this, because I had heard the name Hammer and Tongs before as like music video directors. I did not know that you were part of that. You and Nick Goldsmith were a part of that. And so something that I've always been curious about, how did you guys come up with the name Hammer and Tongs?
Oh, Hammer and Tongs was just an expression to go at something. Hammer and Tongs was to go at it with all you've got. And we were like, that'll do. We were just fresh. We were in art school making music videos for like 200 quid. And we needed a collective name. And it's hard choosing a name, like choosing the music for a film. So, because it's very hard to agree on anything. It was the only one we didn't all hate. And we just stuck like names do. We became Hammer and Tongs and started making music videos together. Yeah.
You've made quite a bit of quite a few great music videos. Not just as part of Hammer and Tongs. I remember the Eels video, Last Stop. What's it called?
Yeah, Last Stop This Town. Yeah,
Last Stop This Town.
A bit.
Yeah, I always remember seeing that one on MTV for the first time, and I was, and you've done stuff for REM and one of my favorite bands, Radiohead. I'm just curious.
I love that band.
Do you have a personal favorite music video that you've worked on, either on your own or as part of Hammer and Tongs?
A favorite. They were all great experiences. One of the most fun experiences, like that, they're all different sort of ideas. They have their different merits, I suppose. But I know for sure that all of us who worked on the Supergrass video, Pumping on Your Stereo, with the Jim Henson Company, where we created puppet bodies, that was the most fun you could possibly have on a set. That really was 2 days of just joy, total joy from start to finish. But they were all, to be honest, most of the time it was always a good time. Like, we were doing these mad ideas, somebody let us do them, and we were doing it with our friends. They were all our friends on the crew. So for music you loved, I mean, it doesn't get better than that. So, but Supergrass with the puppets, and that was the first time I met the Henson Company as well. So it was a sort of very special time.
Well, Garth, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on our panel in just a little bit.
See you in a bit.
I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and I am hosting this Meet the Experts panel for film animation, and I'm being joined by Joseph Mateo, the director of Blush on Apple TV+, Tom McGrath, the director of The Boss Baby Family Business from DreamWorks, Kurt Albrecht, the producer of The Mitchells vs. the Machines, which is on Netflix, and Garth Jennings, the director of Sing 2, which will be released by Universal on December 22nd in theaters. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. First question I wanted to ask, I want to go to Tom, and I was curious as to what were the animated pieces that first sparked your interest of working in animation?
Well, two things. I remember being a kid and watching Disney films. They'd re-release them as a theater. I think I'm an old guy. So in the 70s, you'd go to the theater, and I was just blown away because you just step into this world of art. You know, and when I studied animation, it was traditional, you know, and I loved traditional, and then it was right on the cusp of computers taking over. So for me, it was always trying to make the computer do what we could do traditionally so much easier, you know. You know, where people were going for photorealistic, it was always like, well, let's see the brushstrokes on the screen. And I think the fun for me was taking some of the things I remember from my youth in the theater and then putting it into, well, a 7-year-old's imagination might look great if it was, you know, felt like Wet's Opera Doc or what animation could do really well back in its heyday, and to try and get the computer to make it feel like it was handmade and hand drawn. And I think, you know, everybody who worked on the film kind of were fans of early mid-century modern animation and Bob Clampett and that sort of thing, and try and kind of get the computer to do those types of things, whether it was this, you know, the broad style of animation or the subtlety of a scene. You know, if you look at the opening of Lady and the Tramp, it just evokes so much, and it's more of an impressionistic feeling. So I'd say it's like making instead of doing a realist painting, you're trying to make an impressionist painting to lead the audience where you want them to.
And Joe, how about you?
Yeah, I was growing up, you know, I used to watch Saturday morning cartoons. There's this manga that I grew up watching too. It's called Voltus 5. It's like those Japanese super robot, you know, series, which was banned by our president back then, because he doesn't want the kids to kind of like worship robots or whatever. But it didn't make any sense. But
it's a really paranoid view.
Yeah, but my first thing, I remember having a Preston Blair book and just flipping through it and like learning the process of animation and how much work goes into it. And I remember thinking like, I don't think I can do this. So I was more of a comic book guy growing up. You know, I love comic books. And it's not until college, actually, when I met Marianne, my wife in college, that I got into animation because she was so into it. And I remember watching Little Mermaid with her 5 times in a row. You know, so she was the one who really got me into animation. So, yeah.
And how about you, Kurt?
Well, for me, I'm not an artist, so I loved animation growing up as a kid, and all forms of entertainment. The animation I loved maybe the most as a kid was the anime series. It's called Star Blazers here, but I think it's Space Battleship Yamato in Japan. But it's I loved that as a kid, and then but never occurred to me to do this for a living because I grew up in a small town where there was dairy farmers and loggers. So. And I just came to LA looking for work out of college, and I landed at a small production company, and there was live action and animation. And I really fell in love with the medium because for me, it's so collaborative. You get to work with so many talented people, and every one of those people has a chance to get something in the film. I love that about animation. So it's like you get to work, especially all of us are at the feature level, you get to work with literally some of the best artists on the planet. It is amazing the people that we rub elbows with on a daily basis. So I love that about animation. So that to me is I fell into it, but I love the collaboration in the community.
And how about you, Garth?
I sort of loved everything as a kid. I just thought everything was marvelous, like music and but animation was just part of all this wonderful stuff going on, whether it was a Star Wars movie or it was E.T. flying around and eating Reese's Pieces. But I remember the Sledgehammer video for Peter Gabriel coming on TV, and it was so radical. I was like, what? And also that was that time of like Aha's Take on Me, and there was just that stuff was like, it was really magic. So although I loved all the Disney movies and the Saturday morning cartoons, the music videos were like going next level with it all. And then of course, those guys that made that Sledgehammer video, I find out that they're responsible for one of my favorite characters, which is called Morph. And it was part of a children's show called Take Heart. And it used to be this little animated figure that would pop up in the middle of the show and do a little, comedy skit. And that was Peter Lord, and that became Aardman. And then when The Wrong Trousers went on TV, we're all like, it's the greatest movie ever made. And it's like, I'm literally weeping at this train track scene at the end. It's like, this is brilliant. I'm laughing. And I just find the whole thing, this medium we're in, is just, like you just said, we're able to work with these amazing artists on every level. And I think they were too in those days. It was just, you could be really, you could do something really magical with this. And so yeah, there's an awful lot of influences, an awful lot of inspirations from that time. But those are the ones that stick out right now as you ask the question.
Yeah.
That by the way, that is the correct answer. Sledgehammer music video is. It's my personal favorite song of all time and music video of all time. It's a masterpiece.
Funny, when I went to Cal Arts, they were working on the Aha video, and I was like, "What are
really?
people doing?" And they're like drawing over photos, And I'm going, "What is this? Everyone's working on." And of course, it came out. It's like, "Oh, well, that's it." I mean, like,
wow, that is history there.
That's
Take
awesome.
on Me. So good that it was actually a hit song as well. It'd been terrible if all that work had been for an appalling record.
I know, right?
Yeah. Thank God it was for a good song. I'm just trying to think of what it could have been. But anyway, thank goodness.
Next one I want to go to is Kurt. I want to start with you. So we've talked about. I asked about what your favorite, what was like the first piece of animation that drew you into the medium. What is your one of your favorite pieces of animation that you've seen in, say, the last 10 years?
I love the Spider-Verse movie, and I know that's an easy answer, but I was around Sony when it was being made. But I think it's beautiful for one thing, and then also it's just a darn good film. I mean, I'd say it's one of the best Marvel movies made. So I think it succeeds on both levels. It's just a great film, and then also introduces new techniques, is beautiful, makes you care about the characters. It's one of my favorite things. And the thing I've loved in the last week, which is inspired by Spider-Verse, I think, is the Arcane series that's on Netflix now. It looks pretty great. You know, that's a lot of fun to watch. And I like it because I can watch it with my kids.
And Joe, how about you?
I love Spider-Verse too. I think, I was working on Big Hero 6 when I found out about it, and it's just, oh man, it's like this is the next level, like they're setting a bar. It's so awesome. And when I finished after watching it, I was like, oh my God, that's like the best comic book movie that I've ever seen. That's like it really showcases the comic book, the style and just the way everything was, because I'm a big comic book fan. And before that, Incredibles was for me because of my love for like comic books. And I love working on Big Hero 6. That was like, for me, it's like a full circle, for me wanting to be a comic book artist to like working at Disney in animation, a storyboard artist, and then working on the Marvel titles. So yeah.
And Garth, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, Spider-Verse was. I've got 4 sons. You can imagine how well that went. That was a hit trip to the cinema, if ever there was one. Really staggeringly good. And I'm just thinking now, the other ones that have really stuck with us all as a family. Well, there's loads actually, but I know for a fact Ratatouille comes back time and time again. We absolutely adore that. And The Iron Giant. Those aren't recent, I know, but they are films that really stay with me and are kind of often quoted around the dinner table, as far as there's always something relevant in them. And they're just marvelous and eccentric. And it still amazes me to this day that somebody got away with pitching a rat in a kitchen to a studio. I just think that's great. He's in the hat. How's he doing it? He's in the hat. At no point did anyone say, well, that's just ridiculous. We can't be doing that. It's like, all right, let's do it. Amazing. And it's so great. I love it.
And Tom, what about you?
I never saw Spider-Verse. Here and I grew up in the same dairy logging state. I love Spider-Verse, but I was just thinking, I'm a huge Tom Moore fan, and everything cartoon. I think just because of my roots. But I remember being at Annecy, I saw this film called The Red Tortoise or The Red Turtle. Red Tortoise, I think. And it
Red
was
Turtle,
yeah, and it was a very small independent film, but it just reminded me what I loved about animation, which is the simplicity of it. And there's no dialogue, it was just music. And I it's like, oh, here's an art house movie. And I got swept up by it. And just like, oh no, and is this guy gonna drown in these waves? And it was really the most simple, basic animation, but I cared. And it just reminded me, like, that's the illusion, the great illusion of animation is just this, sometimes the simplicity of it and the fact that it is international and it can speak to everybody regardless of dialogue and that kind of thing. And it makes you think. It just makes me, inspired to break out of the 3-act structure or to be so dependent on dialogue and to get down to the roots of what makes animation so special. So that was an inspiring film.
Last question I wanted to ask is first to you, Tom. Is there something you know now about working in animation that you wish you had known when you first started working in the medium?
I think I can speak as a director. I think after 6 movies, you kind of the nice thing is you learn from your last project and how you want to make it a better space and a safer space for everyone working on the film, because we all have hundreds of people working on these, and to allow that they would have a voice in it. And I think through the process is like you always know what you have in your head of how the film should play out, but I think the learning curve for me, especially in the last couple of films, is really kind of open it up to people to contribute and use the rules of improv, where it's yes and. If someone has an idea, you never shoot it down. You just think about it and work on it. And I think that's when the greatest movies are made, is when other people have on your crew can feel like they're part of it and are contributing to it in a way. And And, you know, if you let people play in the sandbox, you'll get 10 ideas that are better than your one idea, you know. And I think even working from home on Zoom allowed that collaboration to happen a little bit better, because everyone's name's on the screen like we are. No one can hide in the back of the room, and you can have these creative conversations. I think that now we can take back to the studio when it opens up again.
And Kurt, what about you?
I'd echo what Tom's saying. I mean, like, just trying to bring in as many ideas as early as you can. Like, that's one thing. Working with the other producers on Mitchell's, Phil Lord, Chris Miller, they just always want to make it better. That's what they're pushing for. And being around that, you know, I think that's something that I'm remembering. Like, you know, you always never be satisfied if it's what's the word they use? If there's a line that's a little too sweaty, you know, just keep working on it. You know, I think it's that, trying to always look for solutions. If someone comes up with a better idea and it's too late and you can't afford it, we'll try to figure out a way to make that work. You know, try to do your best to convince the bosses or move money around or whatever it is to just try to get the best thing in the film. And I think pushing hard for that all the way through is something I would tell my younger self, when it was my younger self might have been more eager to go out and get a drink at 7 o'clock. Just keep working on it, you know.
And Joe, how about you?
You know, when I started in animation, I was like, it's a lot of work, right? Like, and there's a demystification that happened, you know, my first year, I think, and then, you know, you get to be part of it. Now, you know, just realizing you're making the magic too, you know, you're part of that hard work that creates that magic. And for me, just collaborating with people, you know, I agree with Tom, even though you haven't seen Spider-Verse yet, but no, I'm kidding. No, I just, collaborations is a big thing, you know, and me as a storyboard artist, it's very, I think what's key too is like having a safe room to kind of not be afraid to open ideas, and for people to be, you know, not to feel comfortable in throwing out ideas, and for me that's a key part, you know. Speaking as story artist, speaking as a you know, new director, when I started production, I thought all my years at Disney kind of prepared me that I already know enough to make my first short, right? But it was a very humbling experience, and fortunately for me, I had a lot of like people who were willing to mentor me, and you know, I learned a lot. And knowing that you're not alone going into this, and to really know what your crew's strengths are is a big key to like and letting just you don't need to know everything, you know. So, and just learn to trust the talent of your crew, and you know, their strengths, focus on their strengths, and just be open to going back to what Tom said, collaboration is a big thing. That's how we make the magic. It's not just made by one person, you know.
And Garth?
Everything you all said is so true. I just would say exactly the same. Giving people room to come up with the best idea. Best idea wins. Room to fail, room to break it and try again. That, you know, what Kurt was saying about finding a way, that's one of the great, just thrilling parts of it all, I think. You know, like that, how on earth are we going to solve this problem? And I found the whole process very moving. I really do, partly because I don't know how many of my people do it. The team are extraordinary, and I find the passion and the dedication. When somebody presents something beautiful and finished, I find it really, really magical. And I suppose I love this process, even though it's been the hardest thing I've ever done. I really cherish working with artists and that process. I love being in a room with artists, whatever their field. And so I suppose going forwards, I would just make sure that we always are in a place where that is recognized and protected, because it's very special to be able to do this with so many amazing people.
Well, Joe, Tom, Kurt, and Garth, thank you so much for joining us for this panel. We wish you all the best this award season. And to all our viewers at home, please don't forget to go to goldderby.com and use the Gold Derby app to make your predictions and try to outsmart the top prognosticators in Hollywood. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Charlie.
Thanks, Charlie. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thanks.